Revenge Office Stories. My boss thought a 30-year-old woman was an easy target. He figured I'd back down after I spoke up against his unethical plan. A few veiled threats, a bad performance review. He thought that's all it would take to make me fall in line. He saw my diligence as obedience, my quiet professionalism as weakness. But what he didn't count on was my determination. I wasn't just trying to save my job. I was ready to burn his whole corrupt world to the ground. He thought he was the predator, but he was just the prey that didn't know it was being hunted. This is the story of how I took on a corrupt system and won. If you believe in fighting for what's right and enjoy a good story where justice is finally served, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming. For 5 years, I poured my life into Innovate Dynamics. From the outside, we looked like the gold standard in fintech. Our downtown office was all glass and steel, filled with the brightest minds in the industry, and I was one of them. At 30, I was a senior project manager, and I was damn good at my job. Meticulous, even. I was the one they gave the impossible projects to, the tangled messes that needed a steady hand and an obsessive eye for detail. I thrived on it. I believed in the work we were doing, or at least the version we sold to the public. My boss was a man named Arthur Sterling. He wore his ambition like a tailored suit, all charisma and capped teeth. He was the kind of leader who could give a rousing speech on corporate ethics in the morning and sign off on something deeply unethical by lunch. He had a way of making you feel special, chosen, as long as you were useful to him. And he loved my work because it made him look good. My successes were his successes. I single-handedly saved a project called the Phoenix Initiative, launching it months ahead of schedule and netting the company millions. Sterling took most of the credit, of course, mentioning my name once as an afterthought in a big meeting. I didn't mind. I was there to build things, not for the glory. I thought my work spoke for itself. That was my first mistake. The office was competitive, but I kept my head down. I wasn't interested in the politics or the backstabbing. My colleagues were a mix of brilliant people and the sycophants who laughed a little too loudly at Sterling's jokes. I was cordial, but not close to anyone. My focus was my work. My sanctuary was my project plans. I was known as the one who always had a contingency plan, who saw the iceberg long before it hit the ship. Sterling used to joke, "There's Lena, ready to tell us all the ways this can go wrong." Everyone would chuckle, but he wasn't really joking. He relied on my caution. Until the day he decided to build the pitfall himself and expected me to jump right in. I remember the week before it all fell apart. We'd just landed a huge client. Sterling called me into his corner office with a panoramic view, smiling, pouring sparkling water. "To you, Lena," he said. "You did good." He started talking about a new legacy project. He wanted me to lead a hand-picked team. This was it. The moment I'd been working for. I felt a surge of excitement, of loyalty. I thought he was finally seeing my value. He wasn't offering me an opportunity. He was testing my complicity. A week later, I was summoned to a confidential meeting. Not in a normal conference room, but in the high-security innovation lab on the executive floor. Inside, it was just Sterling, our head of legal, George, and me. On the wall was a single title card, Project Nightingale. The name sounded elegant. It was anything but. Sterling started talking, buzzing with a weird, conspiratorial excitement. "What if," he began, "we could anticipate our clients' decisions before they even make them?" He described a new software platform, but the core of it was the data plan. He wanted to use a loophole to scrape and analyze not just our clients' financial data, but their peripheral data, too. Emails, calendar entries, even their location data. It would create a psychographic profile so detailed it would feel like we were reading their minds. I felt a chill go through me. I'm not a lawyer, but I knew enough about data privacy to know this was a minefield. This wasn't just stepping on a mine. It was building a factory on top of it. I looked at George, the lawyer, expecting him to be the voice of reason. He just sat there nodding. "This is incredibly invasive, Arthur," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The legal and reputational risk is enormous. The user consent would have to be so explicit it would scare everyone away." Sterling just waved his hand. "That's where you're wrong." George found a way to bundle the consent into the terms of service. A single checkbox. No one reads the fine print. By the time they figure it out, we'll own the market. He was openly, proudly admitting to a plan that hinged on deception. The respect I had for him curdled into disgust. I pushed back harder. "This is fundamentally unethical. Our entire brand is built on trust. If this gets out, we're ruined." George finally spoke, his voice a dry rasp. "The legal team has assessed the risk, Lena. We believe it's manageable." Manageable. That was the word he used for, "We think we can get away with it." Sterling's smile finally dropped. "Your job isn't to question the vision, Lena. Your job is to execute it. I brought you in because you're the best. You can get this built. This project is the future of this company. You're either on the train or you're on the tracks. Do you understand?" The threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. On the train or on the tracks. It was a loyalty test, and I was failing spectacularly. I was being ordered to build a weapon aimed directly at our clients, with my name all over the blueprints. I left that room with a knot in my stomach. Project Nightingale now sounded like a siren song, luring us all toward the rocks, and I was being handed the helm. I went home that night and couldn't sleep. On the train or on the tracks. It wasn't about loyalty, it was about legality. It was about right and wrong. The next morning, I decided I wouldn't be a silent accomplice. I spent 2 hours writing a careful, professional email. I laid out my concerns about Project Nightingale, citing specific data privacy laws. I detailed the potential for massive fines and catastrophic damage to our reputation. I even proposed an alternative approach. I copied George from legal, hoping to force his hand. I hit send and felt a moment of relief. I had done my duty. I had a paper trail. That feeling lasted exactly 93 minutes. Sterling called me into his office. The door clicked shut. The charm was gone. His face was pure ice. He had my email printed out on his desk. "What is this, Lena?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "It's my assessment, Arthur. The one you pay me for. I'm identifying risks." "You're undermining me," he snapped. "I'm trying to stop the company from committing corporate suicide." He laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Oh, save the drama. You're a mid-level employee who thinks she knows better than the entire executive team. Let me be clear. Your concerns are dismissed. Nightingale is moving forward. And if you so much as whisper the word unethical again, we're going to have a conversation about your future at this company, or lack thereof." That was the first direct threat. The retaliation had begun. It started small. I was suddenly forgotten on meeting invites for Nightingale. My other projects were put under a microscope, with Sterling questioning every tiny detail. It was a classic case of an employer creating a hostile environment to punish someone for speaking up. A month later, the next blow landed, my performance review. For 5 years, they'd been stellar. This time, I sat across from Sterling as he read from a work of fiction. "Lacks a collaborative spirit," he read. "Displays a pattern of resistance to leadership." He had twisted my diligence into defiance. He was building a case to fire me. "This is because of Nightingale," I said, my voice shaking. "This is retaliation." He leaned back, a smug look on his face. "You seem emotional, Lena. Maybe the pressure is getting to you. You're a 30-year-old woman in a high-stress job. It's understandable. Perhaps a less demanding role is a better fit." The condescension was infuriating. I had one last shot, HR. I went in with my emails, my log of excluded meetings, my glowing past reviews. I laid it all out for Brenda, the head of HR. She listened with a practiced, sympathetic frown. "It's clear there's a personality conflict," she said when I finished. "This isn't a personality conflict," I countered. "This is retaliation for raising a legal and ethical concern." Brenda's mask slipped. "Lena, Arthur Sterling is a senior vice president with the full backing of the board. Are you sure you're seeing this clearly?" She suggested I take a few days off to de-stress and said HR would look into it, corporate code for "we are going to bury this." I walked out of her office, feeling like I was underwater. They had closed ranks. Sterling, legal, HR, they were all part of a machine designed to protect the powerful. My career here was over. It was just a matter of when they'd pull the trigger. And in that moment of total isolation, a different feeling started to bubble up through the fear. Determination. Cold and hard. Sterling wanted a soldier for his dirty war. Fine. He had just created his own worst enemy. The moment had come. We weren't just going to report this. We were going to detonate it. A complaint to a government agency could get buried for months. A lawsuit could be dragged out for years. We weren't giving them that luxury. We were going for maximum impact. Maximum chaos. The plan was a three-pronged attack, executed all at once. First, the regulators. My lawyer prepared a full whistleblower submission for the SEC and a report for the FTC, detailing the plan to deceive investors and violate consumer privacy laws. Second, the press. I researched investigative journalists who specialized in tech and corporate crime. I found her, a reporter with a reputation for being relentless and protecting her sources. I created an encrypted email account and sent a message. I have irrefutable proof of a massive, illegal data harvesting scheme at a major fintech company. Documents prove a conspiracy to deceive users and investors and cover up. Interested? Third, the company itself. My lawyer drafted a blistering legal notice to the board of directors, bypassing Sterling entirely, informing them of my intent to sue for illegal whistleblower retaliation. It included a preview of our smoking gun evidence. D-Day was a Tuesday. My heart was pounding out of my chest. This was the point of no return. With 3 clicks of a mouse, I set it all in motion. The reports were sent. The email to the journalist was sent. My lawyer's notice to the board was sent. For 24 hours, there was silence. The most nerve-wracking silence of my life. I went to work the next day, my stomach in knots, expecting security to tap me on the shoulder at any moment. Sterling walked past my desk with a smug little smirk, like he knew my time was up. He had no idea. The game had changed. This wasn't about saving my job anymore. This was about justice. The fear didn't disappear, but it turned into fuel. I stopped thinking like a victim and started thinking like a strategist. This was my new project. Project Takedown. Phase 1 was evidence. I needed an arsenal. My email was a start, but it was my word against a senior VP's. I needed undeniable proof. I started staying late, using my project manager access to dig into the Nightingale files. The technical specs were even worse than I thought. The documents were labeled attorney-client privilege, a deliberate attempt to shield them from discovery. I made encrypted copies and saved them to a secure hard drive I kept hidden at home. I documented everything. Every passive-aggressive email, every missed meeting. My meticulous nature, the very thing Sterling mocked, was now my greatest weapon. I was building a case, brick by brick. I also became a student of my own predicament, spending my nights reading up on whistleblower protections. I learned that retaliation is illegal, but you have to prove it. I realized I couldn't do this alone. I needed an ally. There was one person, Ben from IT. He was quiet, a bit of a cynic, and had an almost religious belief in data privacy. I asked him for coffee and cautiously laid out the situation. "You're talking about Nightingale, aren't you?" he asked, his voice low. He'd seen the network requests. He said it felt dirty. That was my opening. I told him everything. I saw the anger build in his face. "What do you need?" he asked. He was in. Ben became my inside man. He found the smoking gun. Server logs showing George, the lawyer, had backdated legal approvals for Nightingale after I raised my concerns. Proof of a cover-up. He passed me the file on a thumb drive in a chance encounter in the elevator. It felt like a scene from a spy movie. The final piece was legal counsel. I used my savings to hire a top employment lawyer who specialized in whistleblower cases. I walked into her office with my encrypted hard drive and laid out the timeline, the evidence, the retaliation. She listened, her face unreadable. Then she reviewed Ben's server logs. A slow smile spread across her face. "Mr. Sterling," she said, "has made a very, very big mistake." She confirmed my actions were protected and that the company's response was a textbook case of illegal retaliation. Walking out of her office, I felt a power I hadn't felt in months. I had evidence. I had an ally. I had a lawyer. Sterling thought he'd silenced me. He thought he'd made me invisible. But in the shadows, I had been forging a sword, and I was finally ready to use it. The bomb went off at 9 a.m. on Thursday. The journalist, who had replied within an hour and worked frantically, published her story. The headline was explosive. Innovate Dynamics implicated in secret Project Nightingale to illegally harvest user data. The article was a masterpiece of destruction. It laid out the whole scheme, quoting from the internal documents I'd leaked. It even mentioned, without naming me, that a project manager who raised the alarm was met with retaliation. The story spread like fire. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. Within minutes, the company's stock price fell off a cliff. My phone buzzed with notifications as other news outlets picked up the story. The office descended into chaos. People were huddled around their monitors, whispering, their faces a mix of shock and fear. I saw Sterling storm out of his office, his face chalk white, shouting into his phone. He walked right past me, but didn't see me. His world was imploding. The board called an emergency meeting. Less than an hour later, two grim-faced men in suits I'd never seen before, external counsel, the corporate equivalent of undertakers, walked onto our floor. They went into Sterling's office, then George's. Around noon, a company-wide email went out. Emergency all-hands meeting at 2 p.m. I sat at my desk and watched the empire crumble. I saw Brenda from HR walk by, her face ashen. Her attempt to manage the situation had just blown up in her face. We made eye contact for a split second. In her eyes, I saw pure fear. She knew she had backed the wrong horse. At 2 p.m., the atrium was packed. The CEO, a man who usually only appeared on video calls from his yacht, stood at the podium. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 5 hours. He announced that Arthur Sterling and George were suspended, effective immediately. He announced Project Nightingale was terminated. He promised full cooperation with the SEC and FTC, who had just confirmed they were opening formal investigations. He talked about integrity and trust, but it was too late. I watched from the back of the crowd, invisible. They had tried to silence me, to make me small, to erase me. But in the end, it was my voice, amplified by the truth, that brought the whole corrupt structure crashing down. It wasn't just a victory. It was vindication. In the weeks that followed, Innovate Dynamics went into full damage control. Sterling and George were quietly fired. Several other executives resigned. The company faced a barrage of lawsuits and a massive fine from regulators. They survived, but as a shadow of their former self, their brand permanently tarnished. And me? Faced with an unwinnable lawsuit, the company was eager to make me go away. They offered me my job back, a promotion, a corner office. For a second, it was tempting, but I couldn't take it. I had exposed the poison. I had no desire to stay and help clean it up. Instead, I took the settlement, a very, very generous settlement. It was their apology in the only language they truly understood, money. Enough to walk away and never worry about a vindictive boss again. I signed the papers, walked out of that glass and steel cathedral for the last time, and never looked back. They tried to silence me. They underestimated me because I was a woman, because I was 30, because I was quiet. They thought their power was absolute. But they forgot that true power doesn't come from a title or a corner office. It comes from conviction. It comes from the courage to speak the truth, even when your voice shakes. The system is often designed to protect itself. HR isn't always your friend. They count on your silence. They bet on your fear. But you have rights, and knowing those rights is your shield and your sword. Document everything. Find your allies, and know that standing up, even if you're standing alone, can create a shockwave that changes everything. My boss wanted to put me on the tracks to be run over by his ambition. But in the end, I was the one who derailed his entire train. So many of us have faced situations where we were told to stay quiet, to just fall in line. What's your story? Share your experiences in the comments below. Let's create a community where speaking up is celebrated, not silenced. And if you found this story compelling, please subscribe and turn on notifications. The fight for a better workplace is far from over.